What's up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Thursday, January 20th. I'm your host, Justin Bales, joined over here by Max. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm good. Just getting over COVID, so that was fun.
Glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, but I feel better. So, yeah, it wasn't too bad, actually. We're just having to quarantine for a few days with the kids. So,
I mean, I'm glad that nothing too crazy came about of it. I've had some people that have had some very negative effects from it, and they say it's legitimately bad.
yeah, it's hit or miss. But yeah, I was pretty lucky. My wife caught it too, but she's already getting better as well.
That's great news. On this slate for NBA, only 3 games. We had 13 yesterday, 2 on Tuesday. Now we have 3 games. I believe Friday is another double-digit game slate. And then on Saturday, I think there's either 3 or 4 again. We're in this weird spell of NBA. It kind of is what it is. I believe come Sunday and then moving forward for at least the next week, we're back to the kind of mid-range slates where we're kind of have like between 6 and 8 games, 6 and 9 games. So I don't know. I slightly prefer that because I don't like the 2 or 3 game slates. I feel like it kind of really limits what you can do. I do know that there are plenty of pivots and stuff, but before we get into that, if you enjoy this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications. If you don't want to miss any of our videos, it will send you the link once it is posted. Also, drop any comments that you have below. We'll be in throughout the day to answer them. That's essentially anything that you're wondering about the slate. You can head over to dfskarma.com, which is where you can find all of our free articles, also our core plays package. If you look on the screen, up in the top left corner, it says pricing. That is where you will find the packages. With those, you get our actual core plays. You get our premium content that comes out. You also get into our premium Discord, and you get the projections that you do see on the screen right now. As you can see, quite a bit going on the projections. We have the player position team, all the normal stuff like that. We also have projected points, floor points, ceiling points if you're a cash game or tournament player, ownership. We also have projected minutes, fantasy points per minute, all the advanced metrics, assist rate, rebound rate, pace boosts, everything like that. The big one over here that it's currently sorted by karma value, which essentially tells you which plays are the best based on a per dollar aspect of the game. It kind of gives you a little bit between, the high end guys you want to play, the mid range. It takes their price into account, whereas you're not just looking at Jokic saying he's going to score the most amount of points, but you're not taking the price into consideration whatsoever. So these do come with our core plays package. Once again, dfskarma.com. You can click on the pricing tab. That will take you directly there. For tonight's slate, only 3 games. Run through the injury news very quickly. For New Orleans, Devontae Graham is questionable. On the opposite side of that game, Nerlens Noel, Ryan Arcidiacono, and Cam Reddish all ruled out. DeAndre Ayton and Abdel Nader both already ruled out for Phoenix. You have Sterling Brown out for Dallas. Maxi Kleber and Reggie Bullock have both already been ruled in. Last night, Malcolm Brogdon was ruled in. Max and I were kind of talking about it before we got on here. Seemed odd that he would play the front end of a back-to-back, but it's kind of something to keep an eye on. Right now, it seems as if he's going to play in this game, but I would personally consider him questionable until they actually rule him into this game because you don't really know what's going to happen, especially with him missing so much time. Only real news for the Golden State side is Otto Porter Jr. has already been ruled out of this game, and that's about it for the injury news. So we can shift over to position by position. We will start at point guard. Max, why don't you start it off for us? Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, point guard has a couple high-priced options in Steph Curry and Luka Doncic. I haven't been playing Steph much this year, and so far it hasn't burned me. He also, with Klay Thompson in, he just hasn't been putting up quite the numbers he did when Klay was out. It's taken away. I think it was like a 6% usage hit I pulled up the other day. So it is a significant hit to Curry. So I prefer Luka Doncic on the high end, and he's probably my favorite spend up option over 10K. So Luka, I don't know how he's been doing on Wednesday, but previous to that, he was starting to fill up the stat sheet again. He's looking more like the Luka of old. 10-4 price tag. I'm fine with that. Yeah, he's been over 50 fantasy points number of games now. So I'm fine with Luka on the high end. You actually do have a lot of options at point guard for a 3-game slate. You get Devin Booker and Chris Paul from Phoenix. Devin has just this crazy ceiling. I don't know if I'd want to.
Attempts.
Yeah, I mean, what was it the other day? He put up over 70 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always an option, and the price tag at 8,300 is fine. I usually side with Chris Paul just because, like, here he's $800 cheaper than Booker. So if that savings can get you somewhere, sometimes for cash games, I like taking that savings with Chris Paul. And then on the lower end, we got Kemba Walker, who started last game and actually played, I think he played around 30 minutes. He had a decent game. I think he put up like 30 plus fantasy points. So Kemba versus New Orleans at 6,100. I don't mind that, especially if his minutes are trending up, which I expect them to. And then we have Alexander Walker. He could be an option depending on the Devontae Graham news, but Alexander Walker at 3,600 is just really cheap. So I would look there, and I'd love that play if Graham's ruled out. I mean, Alexander Walker's he's close to a fantasy point a minute, and I would guess if Graham's out, he's going to see probably 25 minutes or so. I don't know if he'd start. Sometimes they start like Garrett Temple, but I don't know if you'd want Temple. But yeah, Alexander Walker would be the guy with the upside that I'd be looking to.
Yeah, I agree essentially with the breakdown. I don't know if I'm deciding between the top two. I think I favor Luka Doncic over Steph as well. I do really like Devin Booker there. Don't have any true issues with someone like Chris Paul. As you move down, Kemba Walker, like you said, is the obvious option. He gets the matchup against New Orleans, who's really bad defensively against point guards. Walker dropped, I believe, 29 in 30 minutes in his last game, which was his first one back. And they said that his conditioning was questionable. So the fact that he played 30 minutes with quote unquote questionable conditioning, I mean, I feel like he's going to be locked in for 30 plus tonight as well. And if you looked up,
just a nugget on Kemba. So I was looking at his game log. He didn't play for a month, like previous to this injury, like I don't know, like half a month ago. And he came back and Tibbs ran him out for 37 minutes off of a month without playing. So that's what got me on him a little bit last night. So I don't know that Tibbs even believes in minutes restrictions.
Yeah, he kind of like says it and then is just like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So when you also look at what he did against New Orleans in their first game, I think he dropped 40 against them. They're just not good at guarding point guards. They're not good at guarding scoring point guards, and that's basically what Kemba is anyway. So I do think that Walker's too cheap there. Devontae Graham is probably going to change this slate just based on his news. He's way too cheap if he's starting at 5,100. He's one of the better options. If he's out, Alexander Walker is probably going to be very chalky, as he should be. Just way too cheap at 3,600. And then the only other guy that I'm really considering at point guard would be Cam Payne, who you can also use at shooting guard. I mean, he doesn't always produce, but he can drop 30 plus points in 20, 25 minutes. So that's the kind of guy on a 3-game slate that you want. People are going to be scared off of him a little bit because he's so inconsistent. But I mean, there's 3 games. You need to find value somewhere and you need to find upside somewhere. You might as well get it together. And that's essentially what Cam Payne can do. So I do think at 4,200, he's at least in play. Shifting to shooting guard, break down what you're looking at here.
Yeah, we touched on Devin Booker. on the high end at shooting guard, so he's a fine play if you want to use him at shooting guard as well. Brandon Ingram at 8,000. He does get a little tough matchup with New York. New York plays pretty slow, but 8,000 is a really good price tag on Ingram. He's been playing 35-ish minutes a night, and yeah, I don't mind that 8,000 price tag at all if you want to go kind of in a mid-range build on this slate. Other than that, on the high end, Karis LeVert I had highlighted, but that's really a play dependent on Brogdon playing. So if Brogdon plays, I probably don't want any LeVert. But if Brogdon doesn't play on the second half of a back-to-back, I would probably LeVert would become my favorite shooting guard play. I just love his upside when Brogdon's out. And then on the low end, Chris Duarte is another play kind of dependent on the Brogdon news. He's priced at 4,300, so he's really if Brogdon's in, I'd probably have no interest. But if Brogdon's ruled out, I would love Duarte at 4,300. Even if he comes off the bench, he should see 25 plus minutes. And other than that, you have Klay Thompson also in the mid range. He's just not getting huge minutes yet, but he can be so efficient, and his usage is really high this year, surprisingly. I don't know if that's going to come down at all, but yeah, 5,300. I know against Detroit just the other night, I mean, he had a pretty big game in like 23 minutes. So he can pop off even in 23, 24 minutes for a pretty big fantasy night if he's hitting his threes. So I don't mind Klay in GPPs.
Yeah, I mean, I think he nailed it. That's basically everyone that I was going to say. Klay Thompson's just too cheap for the pure upside. I know he's not going to drop 50 fantasy points in 30, 35 minutes, but he can drop 30 in 20, 25. And at 5,300 on this type of a slate, that's relatively good enough, especially because he does come with more upside. And as the season progresses, he's going to play more minutes. I don't necessarily think this early he's going to break out of like the weird mold of the 20 to 25, but I do think he comes with enough upside. Booker, Ingram, LeVert, all at the top. I think that's fine. If you're not going them, you probably drop down to Klay Thompson. If you don't go Thompson, I agree. You probably drop down, and it depends on injury news to Chris Duarte or Alexander Walker. And then I also think, obviously, if campaign is viable in that spot as well. But that's essentially what I'm looking at. I guess you could add Garrett Temple, like you said earlier. If Devontae Graham is out, you can take a shot there. But it's not like Garrett Temple is going to light the world on fire, really. And there's not even too much of a guarantee that he gets big minutes with Devontae Graham out, especially with Alexander Walker there. So I probably just prefer Alexander Walker at that point. But that's about it for shooting guard. It's only 3 games, and there's not really that many great options, if we're being honest. So that's just kind of how it goes sometimes at some of these positions. I feel like small forward is always just a terrible position. But are you looking at anyone in specific here?
Yeah, you can slot Brandon Ingram. You could use him at small forward too. He has dual eligibility. RJ Barrett priced at 7,200. His price is getting up there. With Kemba playing, I do think that hurts RJ Barrett just a little bit. It hurts his minutes a little, and I could see also his usage coming down slightly. So 7,200 is a lot for Barrett with Kemba back. So I think I'd rather, if we're going to the mid range, I like Josh Hart at 6,300. He's just solid. You know what you get from him. You get 35 plus minutes. You get around close to a fantasy point a minute, 0.9 to a fantasy point a minute guy. He's got a slow matchup, but the price tag kind of reflects that in 6,300. So I don't mind Josh Hart. And then, small forward's pretty ugly. I never play Evan Fournier, and it feels like every small slate, I totally fade him and he just goes crazy. So I don't know. I'm not going to play him, but I cannot get a read for that guy. I mean, he seems to hit his shot whenever I fade him. So
yeah,
and then
it's terrible. This is a terrible position. There's virtually
yeah.
nothing.
The only thing that could open up is all the way down to 3,200. You have Andre Iguodala. He's listed as questionable, I believe. But if he plays with Otto already ruled out, he should get 20 plus minutes, I would think. And he can put up 18 to 22 fantasy points, which is all you really need at 3,200 on this slate. So I'm really keeping my eye out for the Iguodala news to make sure he's playing.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I hate using someone like Andre Iguodala because he generally does nothing, and not that the Warriors are healthy, but with Klay back, they're healthier than they were.
Yeah.
I mean, with that being said, like in 24 minutes, he's put up 30 plus fantasy points twice, I think in his last 10 games alone, which generally hasn't been what Andre Iguodala does in the last few years. But with Draymond Green not playing and stuff, it just makes sense that could continue to happen.
Yeah, for cash games, I mean, cash games at a really weak position, that almost seems like the play.
Yeah, you can just punt it. It's not
because you're not missing out on much other than maybe Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, I think Ingram's fine. I think you hit the nail on the head with Josh Hart. The only other guy that I think I would add, I guess, would be Justin Holiday, and that's another. I don't want to say ugly play because he's actually been playing well, but it's not like Justin Holiday's really going to light the world on fire or anything. You know, he's getting the minutes. He's been producing. He actually did just drop nearly 50 fantasy points the other night. So the pure upside is there. The problem is, one, he's playing against Golden State, who has a very good defense, regardless of whether Draymond Green is in or out. And two, he has not really played all that well on the road, and they are playing in Golden State. So I don't know. I think that Holiday's at least reasonable because the position is so bad, but that's about it. I think it's a really good call with Iguodala, with Otto Porter Jr. out. And I think outside of that, I probably try to get to Brandon Ingram. If I can't, I probably just move to Josh Hart, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with that. One other play I didn't mention was Finney Smith from the Mavs at 4,600. He's an ugly play. He's kind of similar to Justin Holiday, actually. But Finney Smith the other day, I somehow played a decent amount of him, and he put up almost 40 fantasy points, which is shocking for Finney Smith. Like I didn't even think that was above his ceiling, I thought.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah,
it was a big double for him.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, he's a play. I probably won't. Definitely, I don't think I'll play him in cash. But if you're looking for some GPP, a play that gets 35 minutes, he's out there.
Yeah, I definitely think that's viable to kind of throw in there. At power forward, I mean, up at the top, you have Domantas Sabonis. Obviously, he's been playing well, but he's now, been priced over 10K for quite some time. Hasn't really been hitting the ridiculous ceiling that he flashed like 5 games ago. So it's there, but you never really feel great about paying 10,000 for Sabonis. The other thing is, if Brogdon's playing, obviously Brogdon's going to be controlling the ball a lot more than just completely running through Sabonis with Miles Turner out. So I think he's in play. Not necessarily my favorite play. I also think that Julius Randle and Kristaps Porzingis are both in play for their ceilings at their current price tags. Of the three, I think I would probably save the salary with Porzingis, I want to say. Do you have a good read on any of these three? The only reason, I just feel like Porzingis for under 8,000 kind of not necessarily gives you the same upside, and you're obviously not going to hit that ceiling as often as someone like Sabonis or Randall. But I mean, 7,600 compared to almost 10K for both of them is quite the discount.
Yeah, I think I prefer Porzingis, especially for cash games. He just lets you fit in more. And I mean, Porzingis is having a pretty good year. The only difference really between those plays is Porzingis sees like 32 minutes versus Randall and Sabonis see 36 minutes. But fantasy production wise, I think they're very similar. So yeah, I would probably take the savings with Porzingis if I was to spend up there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Who else at forward or power forward, I guess, are you looking at? Because oddly enough, all the guys in the mid tier are out. They're just not playing. So
yeah, you got to go all the way down to Kuminga at 4,300, who started last game, and I don't know if I can't remember if he was chalky, but he had a pretty decent game, and I think he may have been in foul trouble or he got subbed out early in the first quarter. But he still put up a decent game. So 4,300, he's a pretty good fantasy point producer. I don't remember his rates, but he's probably close to a fantasy point per minute. He's the first round rookie for Golden State this year, so he looks good when he's out there. I watched some of that game against Detroit. So yeah, I like Kuminga at 4,300 as a decent salary saver. And then also on Golden State with Otto Porter out, Bihalika, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but he at 3,600, he should see a couple more minutes. And I always like to play him just because he's such a good fantasy point per minute guy. He's like 1.1 fantasy point per minute. So if he runs into like 20 minutes, he can smash at 3,600. So I always have my eye out for him when it looks like he might get a few extra minutes.
Yeah, that's on the same page here completely. We talked about the expensive guys. If you drop down, you go to Kuminga most likely. I do think a very good pivot off of him is Herbert Jones, and the reason for that is that Jones, one, has plenty of upside because of his steal and block rates, but two, Kuminga's obviously a very raw rookie. If you've ever watched him play, he's not NBA ready at this point. I think he's going to be good in the future. I think he's actually good now, specifically in terms of fantasy. Obviously, he's averaging like a fantasy point per minute. But also, like you said, yeah, he did struggle with fouls in his last game, 5 fouls. He had 5 in the 2 games before that. Both of those were in 25 and 26 minutes. So it's not out of the question that he just gets in early foul trouble, kind of limits what he can do. And obviously, Herbert Jones he's not a first round rookie. I believe he's a second round rookie, but has looked really, really good for the Hornets. And he does come with, at least reasonable upside. So really not out of the question that Jones outscores Kuminga. And at this point, you have to assume that Kuminga is going to be owned significantly higher. So it's just kind of a very solid tournament pivot. And then if you do want to drop all the way down, Bielitsa at 3,600, like you said, very good per minute player. It's not guaranteed, that he gets even 20 minutes. I think he played 18 in his last game, but if he does happen to play 20 to 25 minutes, he can really smash his price tag. And on a 3-game slate where, some spots you're just looking for pure upside, I do agree that that's a really good play.
Yeah, he'll be impacted too if Iguodala is out. So, like if Iggy's out, I would think Bielika's minutes would go up.
Yeah,
because they're running out of bodies kind of at the forwards if Iguodala is ruled out.
Yeah, I completely agree that if Iguodala wouldn't play, I would assume that honestly Kuminga probably starts a small forward, and then someone like Bielitsa or Toscano Anderson could start a power forward.
Yeah.
I don't know if they necessarily would do that. They also could, start Gary Payton.
The Warriors are they're so tough to figure out their rotations.
They're just like versatile and like they are fine playing Klay at the 3, which is weird. But then they also feel comfortable playing Gary Payton at the 3, which again, a little weird. They just love running like those 3 guard lineups. And then it just limits the forwards that they need to bring in, especially when they have guys hurt. So it just puts them in a odd situation all the way around. But I mean, I guess versatility is good for real life basketball. It just hurts us for fantasy.
Yeah, it's hard to predict their rotations sometimes.
At center, I mean, center's kind of a weird spot where JaVale McGee is playing. He played 23 minutes and oddly didn't absolutely dominate in his last game, which I'm hoping it slightly brings his ownership down. In that game, actually, Bismack Biyombo posted almost 40 fantasy points in 25 minutes. So I hope people play Biyombo over McGee. I would probably just look at the two and play the guy that's lower owned. Do you think, is that the route you take, or do you think that Biyombo or McGee really lose value and someone like Jalen Smith gains value because he didn't play much in the last game, but now against a team like Dallas who loves playing Porzingis at the 5, Smith probably is the best on-ball defender for that type of a matchup, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, this spot is so tricky, and they got me the last game because I was so heavy on Jalen Smith, thinking he was going to back up JaVale, and they went with Biyombo, and Biyombo, of course, destroyed in the 24 minutes he played. Yeah. So it's going to be hard to predict. The one thing, the starter, which it will probably be JaVale, but whoever starts, they're pretty safe for 24 plus minutes. And then I know in the last game, they basically just split the center minutes down the middle with Biyombo and JaVale. Based on that, I just have to assume that they're going to split the minutes again with JaVale and Biyombo, but it might be worth, like, if you're making 100, if you're doing like 100 entries, just sprinkling in 1 or 2 with Jalen Smith, because I can't figure out what their rotation is at center. But if JaVale starts, I'm going to be well overweight JaVale and just hope that people fade him because of his last game. I was heavy on him the other night. So yeah, I like JaVale there. But I'll have exposure to both Biyombo and JaVale.
Yeah, I think the same thing personally. I think JaVale's probably the better play. I think he's probably going to draw the start, and I'll just take the safer play at that point, especially if people are going to play Biyombo over him. Another guy that I did want to quick ask about is obviously no Miles Turner. How do you feel about Goga Bitadze? Because last night, or I guess 2 games ago, he played 25 minutes, 24 minutes maybe. So obviously, he's a very good per minute scorer. If he gets 25 minutes, he's going to absolutely destroy his $3,700 price tag. The big thing is, at the time of this podcast, so it's really hard for us to tell you, the Lakers game literally just started. Bitadze didn't start, if that's worth anything, but we have no clue how many minutes he's going to play. Like, I think they're like 2 minutes into the game right now. I just checked.
We're going to have to monitor that box score, but I'm just thinking about it and the matchup with Golden State. I can't see that they would play Goga big minutes versus Golden State.
Yeah, I feel like that's why the Lakers game is so important, because it's very similar. Like, don't get me wrong, Kevon Looney is much more of a center than LeBron James, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's not like Looney's this massive dude that is going to go out, play in the paint, and dominate people like Rudy Gobert or something. But they also love going small. And if Indiana is willing to go small with them, maybe they just go small even more. And then someone like Bitadze can't play, right? So I don't know. To see how many minutes he plays against a team like the Lakers, who obviously use LeBron at the 5, I feel like is going to be really telling for tonight.
Yeah, that's going to be important. So we'll have to monitor that. But yeah, 3,700, and he's a fantasy point per minute monster. So I would love that play. I mean, if for some reason he started, I would have tons of Goga. Mm-hmm. I doubt he would, though, especially if he didn't start tonight. I just doubt he would. And then another play we didn't mention on the high end, Jonas Valenciunis at 7,700. That seems just too cheap to me. He's typically been over 8K. He's been even over 9K, I think, this year. And he has major upside. The big issue with him is just the minutes. Sometimes the rotation, he either gets in foul trouble or sometimes he just has low minutes. I don't know if the coach doesn't like him or what, but he can put up numbers if he gets 32 minutes. So 7,700, I love that price tag. I will probably try to get there pairing that with JaVale in cash games if I can. And then just as a pivot, if for some reason Valenciunis gets in foul trouble or something, Jackson Hayes at 3,200, he's backing him up. So he'd be a direct pivot for tournaments to get some leverage off. I think Valenciunis will be pretty chalky.
Yeah, it's a little odd that Jackson Hayes is getting so many consistent minutes too. Like he's legit playing roughly 18 to 19 minutes basically nightly at this point, which I love to see it. I liked Jackson Hayes a lot when he came out of Texas. So I'm I was a big fan of when Texas had that ridiculous string of big men. Miles Turner, Mo Bamba, Jackson Hayes all came one after the other. Loved when that happened. I thought that all three were really good. So glad to see someone like Mo Bamba finally, breaking out. I think he went toe to toe with Joel Embiid for basically a half tonight.
Night. He broke the slate tonight. Wow.
So I mean, that was fun. I think that about does it, honestly, for center. Is there anyone else that you're looking at? There's no one really for me. I guess if you want to take your shot on like Mitchell Robinson, because at least it's upside, and it's not like New Orleans is good against the center. Like Valenciunis has never been great defensively.
Mitchell Robinson's always he's starting to get priced up, but he's like just a deep GPP play to me usually, unless he's priced at like 4K or less. Taj Gibson would be kind of the pivot off of Robinson at 3,300, but I mean, that's just an ugly play. But Taj did play, I think, like 25 minutes on Tuesday. Mainly, I think, because Robinson was in foul trouble, but just the cheap option you can add for GPPs.
No, that is. It's important to note that you can kind of always make the direct pivot in hopes of something specific happening on nights like tonight where there's only 3 games and you're going to need to get weird. I mean, I guess that's the best way to put it. You're going to have to do something weird. And by weird, I don't necessarily mean get a guy that is going to play 2 minutes and hope that he plays 20. That's not weird. Weird is like play Jackson Hayes and Jonas Valenciunis, who does get in foul trouble at times, gets in foul trouble. That's weird and viable to happen. Don't just plug in. I don't even know who you could think of at this point. Don't just plug in someone ridiculous and be like, oh man, they told me to get weird on the slate. And now he scored 0 and I lose. Like,
well, what I've been doing is, like, for instance, the other day, JaVale McGee, sometimes I like, if you're making, let's say, 20 lineups, I try to get overweight even on like 2 plays that are pivot. So let's say JaVale McGee is going to be pretty chalky. I might get overweight on him and also get overweight on his backup and just set a rule where you only play one of them in your lineups. And I might be overweight on both plays. And then if JaVale busts, those lineups are dead, but I still got a few lineups with, beyond, but the other night it was Jalen Smith. Didn't work out, but just as an example.
I mean, it's a smart way to play.
Yeah, because it leaves you a chance if your heavy chalk guy busts, you still have a few lineups with a pretty low owned play that's probably going to smash, and then you just try to build hope those lineups get you there.
Yep. No, I completely agree with that type of strategy, especially if you're making multiple lineups and stuff. But that's all we have for you guys for tonight. Once again, if you enjoy the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you would like. Drop any comments that you have below. We'll be in throughout the day to answer them. Once again, dfskarma.com is where you can find all of our information. If you look in the description below, you'll find any links that you need for anything that you need involving us. But thank you for watching. Good luck tonight, and I will be back tomorrow with another podcast.